Previously on Historical Geocaching, I'm visiting the Huron Lightship in Port Huron, Michigan. Most recently, our tour guide has explained how foghorns work and about various renovations the Huron ship underwent throughout the years.
Now, some of the other ships that we have here, remember they're all the scale, so the same scale. This one here is significant. It was in Lake St. Clair, south of us here. In 1934, it became the first totally automated lightship in the world. They would just go out and fill it up with oil and do a little maintenance on it, and it had a radio receiver on it, so at night it would be triggered from shore to turn on the light, and to if they couldn't see it, from just like the opposite of up when we were sitting out there when we couldn't see shore, we'd turn on the light. When they couldn't see the lightship from shore, they would turn on the foghorn. So the light would be turned on every night. But that was the world's first automated lightship. Next to it is the oldest lightship, or the very first lightship on the Great Lakes, the Lewis McLean. It was put out there in the year 1832. During 1832, the Black Hawk Wars were going on up in Illinois, Wisconsin, and up in that area, Minnesota. That was the Indian Wars that actually Abraham Lincoln was involved in. So that's kind of a historic year. The other thing that happened that year was the cholera epidemic that happened along the Great Lakes. Actually, cholera was brought into the area by troop ships that were going to the Black Hawk Wars. And troop ship tried to dock in Detroit, and they were inspected and found they had cholera, so they weren't allowed to dock. So they went back out into the Detroit River and came across Lake St. Clair and up this river to Fort Gratiot, which was right here. Well, actually, we would be in the Fort Gratiot Reserve right now. From here up to where the bridge is right now was the Fort Gratiot, and they docked there. Now, they weren't allowed off the ship there either, but the fort's doctor went on to treat guys that had cholera, and he was infected and died within a couple of days. So there were about a half a dozen guys that escaped. When I say escaped, got off the ship, went through town and infected some people in town and caused some deaths in town due to cholera, and got on the Fort Gratiot Turnpike, which is south of town, goes to Detroit, and all of those guys, nobody made it to Detroit. They were all found dead along the road. But there was a few dozen guys that died from that were buried here. Now, I told you this was part of the Fort Gratiot reservation, and up here on the hill is where they buried these guys, and that was the fort's burial ground. And after the Civil War, when U.S. Grant was president, this fort was closed, and it was donated to the city of Port Huron, and the city moved the graves out of here, because now we have a park here and there's no graves. We're not having picnics on graves. They moved all of that up to the city cemetery. So up there's a pretty good size area in the city cemetery that was dedicated to the Civil War and the 1832 cholera epidemic too. And if you go up there, that's kind of an interesting walkthrough. So that's a lot of things about the Lewis McLean, the very first lightship in the Great Lakes, which was up in the Straits of Mackinac. Another interesting lightship was the Buffalo that was lost during the storm of 1913. During that storm, 19 ships were lost, 19 ships were foundered but recovered, and I'm thinking the number is like 85 sailors were killed during that. And during that storm in Lake Erie, this ship was driven to the bottom by the seas. All hands were lost, and the ship was missing for a year and a half. And then behind the lady here, we have some pictures on the wall that show the recovery of that ship in 1915. Starting from here, you can see they just barely, and it wasn't very far from shore. You can see they recovered it there and brought it up to level, and then they finally floated it and brought it back in to be redone. And it actually was rebuilt and put back in service. but all hands were lost. Now here's one where not all hands were lost, but all but 3 hands were lost. There were 15 on board this. 12 were let's see, 6 went to the hospital, 3 survived, and 3 died there, and the rest of them went down with this ship. Was cut in half. This is the Olympic running over the Nantucket Lightship. The Nantucket ship stood 75 or 80 miles out to sea, marking the path to get into the New York harbor. And the Olympic ran it over. Pretty simple. It shouldn't have done that, and it did. And the White Star Line replaced the Nantucket with the LV-112, which was the largest lightship ever to serve in the United States. It had a crew of 25. And that ship is a museum now. It's in Boston Harbor, so the LV-112, called the Nantucket Lightship, is there. It's the largest lightship museum in the United States, and ours is the smallest lightship museum in the United States, so we have something not in common. So.